Good morning and welcome back to Margin. This morning we're going to talk about how much should your home mortgage or your rent payment be. So let's jump right into it. So today we're going to look at how much you can actually afford to spend on housing in 3 steps. So 3 easy steps. Now we are in the longest recorded bull market in history. We have experienced massive growth in home values over the last 10 years. Now this is partially due to just how much they actually corrected during the last downturn, but are also due to the amount of demand in housing, the increase in population, and therefore the demand associated to that for housing. Now, the whole multiple offer situation, bidding up the asking price, waiving inspections, waiving appraisals is nothing new depending on the metropolitan area that you live in. But the last 18 months has only further exacerbated the issue of people being able to get into affordable housing. So we have seen a whole new definition of home and the desire of so many to move from overly crowded cities to spacious suburbs, to places where they're able to spread out and enjoy their space more. Now, you could be in the market to buy a home, a townhome, a condo, or maybe rent one of these spaces or an apartment. Now, whether you rent or buy, it's so important to know how much you can actually afford to spend before you begin looking. Now, I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to people who find their dream home online. They use Zillow or they use Trulia to find their dream home, only to be let down by the fact that they cannot afford it once they go through the pre-qualification process. Now, get pre-qualified before you start looking, as this will ensure you are not wasting your time or maybe even the brokers that you're working with. Now, you may be familiar with what lending institutions typically go by when qualifying you for a mortgage, and oftentimes they'll throw around a figure of 36% of your income that from a debt to income standpoint in order to stay within to qualify for a mortgage. Now, this is a banking institution. This is a institution that will be locking in a mortgage for you. But you may have also heard of someone like Dave Ramsey speak of spending 25% of your net take-home income on housing. Now, no matter what methodology you follow, you need to determine what it is that you are wanting out of life so that you ensure that your housing doesn't inhibit you from actually pursuing that. So why I say this is it's so important to actually figure out what you want before you run out and buy a house that may actually slow you down in the process of pursuing what is actually most important to you. So you may also be familiar with multipliers used to determine whether you qualify for rental, like hearing, let's say, 3 times rent in income per month. And obviously different landlords require different parameters for this. But typically in the rental market, you'll have a multiplier of the amount of income you make that you have to qualify for in order to get that space. Now, I go back to vision, goal setting, and benchmarks a lot in Margin. And I do that because I believe so many people inadvertently continue to remove margin from their lives by the act of purchasing or renting a place they have no business agreeing to. Now, oftentimes people are ignorant and they just don't know what should actually be spent on their basic mortgage payment or rent, not to mention the other costs that go into actually purchasing a dwelling. So what steps should you actually follow in order to determine what you can actually afford. Now, for simplicity's sake, I broke this down into 3 simple steps. Step 1 is to find out what your income is. So for this, you're just going to look at what your take-home pay is, what hits your bank account every 2 weeks, every other week, or every week, and how much income is actually coming in after taxes, after deductions, after your health insurance is deducted by your employer, and so on and so forth. Step 2 is, what are your expenses? Now, if you have a plan to spend or a budget that you operate off of, you should be able to easily identify how much you actually spend on a monthly basis. Take that total amount and subtract out any current housing costs that you spend, so any rent or any mortgage payments. And then from that point, for step 3, this will give you how much discretionary income you actually have to spend. Now, this is basically backing out to see, okay, well, after your basic expenses, before paying out mortgage or rent, how much do you have left over in order to pay a mortgage or rent? So you can figure out from that point what you're comfortable with. Now, of course, if you buy a house or rent an apartment, you'll have either a down payment and closing costs, or you will have a damage deposit and maybe first and last month's rent to factor in. And this is a cost that you can anticipate stepping into either the decision to buy or to rent. But I'm not necessarily looking at that today. It's more focusing on how much you can afford on a regular basis, on a reoccurring basis, rather than a down payment that's a one-time payment. Now, once you have this discretionary figure, it's important for you to sit down and look at your expenses and look at them from a standpoint of what are your actual needs and what are your wants, and what are those things that actually add value to your life, that are actually important for you to have as part of your life. And looking at it that way will help you to be able to answer questions related to your expenses, to yourself, to your spouse, and really be able to dig into that to have a better idea of what is a seemingly mindless purchase that we make, such as a subscription, and what your actual needs are and what they actually look like, and how to limit the wants that you have to only those that actually truly add value to your life. So at this point, you will know what's left over. You can then compare what's left over to what aspects of life need to be added back in the way of your goals. So it may be additional savings for a trip that you want to go on, or it may be saving up for a vehicle or something like that. Now, you may consider taking these goals that you have, adding them into your monthly costs so that you're actually saving for those things, and seeing what's actually left over to spend on housing. And then from that point, you can really determine what you have to spend. Now, the rule of thumb is that you want to be somewhere in that 25 to 30% mark for your housing. Now, of course, the argument really does come down to, is that pre-tax or post-tax? Is that gross income, or is that net take-home pay? Now, what you need to do is go through that process of figuring out what your take-home pay is, take those expenses that you have, back those out, and figure out, based on factoring in your goals, what is left over for housing. And then from that point, you will have a good idea of not only what you are comfortable with spending, but also you are prepared when you go to get pre-qualified, to go begin looking at places and go through that process. Now, my call to action today is to calculate a percentage of your take-home pay that you can spend on housing that will still allow you to accomplish the other goals and benchmarks that you have in your life. And go through that process, as I believe it will be very beneficial for you. If this information is helpful to you, please do like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you're reminded to come back on a daily basis and improve in managing your personal finances. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.